If I'm healing someone and I lose, my arm breaks. What happened? They forgot to turn off the inverse kinematics. In TF2, players can look up and down and turn 45 degrees to either side. But how? Creating animations by hand for all the possible angles you could point at would be a ridiculous amount of work. Plus, other combinations of running, jumping, crouching, multiplied by the different animations you need for all the weapons. There's no way this could be done by hand. So it's not done by hand. Instead, TF2 uses animation layers, a separate animation that only defines how the body should adjust in accordance to where you're aiming, overlaid on top of a base animation. Now you only need to make one running animation, then use an animation layer to add to the base animation to make the character look around. This system works well, but it has problems. For example, hands clipping into the weapon, or hands drifting off into space. So, how do we fix this? The solution was inverse kinematics. Imagine your arm. Forward kinematics is taking what we know about the first two joints to infer where the end joint is. Inverse kinematics is the reverse of that, using the end joint to determine what the first two joints should be doing. With this, you could pin the left hand to the weapon, then apply inverse kinematics to smooth out the two joints leading up to it, fixing our problem with clipping hands and making this system of animation layers work. This is how the Medigun animations work. The medic's right hand is attached to the lever and follows it when the lever is pushed forward and back. The inverse kinematics applied to the medic's Medigun animations work fine, but obviously, it would break if it's used on an animation it's not meant for, such as the loser animations when your team loses. When your team loses and you're forced into the loser animation, even though your weapon is no longer visible, it's actually still there. The Medigun is simply following the rotation of the medic's left hand, which is followed by the lever, which is followed by his right hand, and thus the broken arm is created, because the inverse kinematic animation layer isn't stopped when forced into the loser animation. This issue is actually not exclusive to the medic as well. For example, switching weapons after a melee swing, or switching during a reload. The inverse kinematic animation layers aren't being stopped. It's also why the demo's all-class melee crouch walk and the robot engineer's run is broken. Inverse kinematics doesn't strictly have to be about attaching one part to another. It can also be a relative attachment, a part that follows another's movements and rotations, without taking on its position. In the demo's case, the left hand has a relative attachment to his right hand, which makes him pull his left hand back. If we turn off inverse kinematics, the demo's left hand is actually animated perfectly fine. For Bot Engineer, his left hand has a relative attachment to the weapon in the right hand.
Hand and painful.